What if the planet humanity dreams of conquering isn't empty at all? What if every rover we've sent, every signal we've transmitted, has been feeding something buried beneath the red dust, something ancient, conscious, and hungry? What if an alien appeared not to warn us, but to reveal that what sleeps under Mars is far worse than extinction itself? An alien revealed what's hidden on Mars, and it's far worse than we ever imagined. This isn't science fiction. This is a truth erased from history, a secret older than every civilization on Earth. And once you hear it, you will never look at Mars or your own mind the same way again. If you want more stories like this, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. And now, this is where the real story begins on the night the forbidden signal arrived. In the cold hush of after midnight, when the world felt thin and reality loosened just enough for impossible things to slip through, Alex Mercer sat alone in the telemetry lab, reviewing data that should have been routine. The Mars Orbiter Reconnaissance Array had been silent for nearly 3 years, a dark machine drifting above a dead world, incapable of transmitting anything except its slow decay into cosmic dust. Yet at precisely 2 minutes past 1, a burst of code erupted across his console, a jagged pulse so abrupt it froze him in place. It was not a malfunction. It was not residual noise. It carried intention. He replayed the signal again and again, watching the fractured symbols stabilize into a pattern that felt disturbingly precise. Each cluster translated into coordinates that pointed to the southern polar region of Mars, a place NASA had quietly redacted from public datasets, for reasons no one ever explained to the analysts beneath clearance level 5. Alex felt a pressure in his chest, the first tremor of instinctive dread, as the final line of the transmission resolved into a single sentence. "Do not excavate." The words weighed more than mere data. They carried an echo, as if spoken from the memory of something ancient that still lingered inside the machine. Alex tried to rationalize the message with logical frameworks, checking logs, backtraces, and packet origins. Nothing aligned. The signal had no source. It simply appeared, as if conjured from the void. Then came the deeper unease. The code signature matched nothing built by human engineers. It was older, cleaner, and impossibly elegant. The kind of structure created by a mind unconcerned with human limitations. For a moment, he wondered if he was witnessing a prank, a breach, a rare hallucination triggered by exhaustion. But the signal remained, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat trapped within lines of static. The coordinates began repeating themselves every 7 minutes, steady, patient, almost watchful, as if the sender expected someone to listen. As the room filled with the soft mechanical hum of machines that felt suddenly alive, Alex sensed he had crossed an invisible threshold. Something on Mars that should have remained silent had awakened, and its first warning had found him alone in the dark. And in that quiet moment he understood that nothing in his life would remain untouched by what came next, now. The signal followed Alex home like an unseen presence, lingering in the quiet corners of his apartment long after he powered down his equipment. The coordinates repeated inside his thoughts, steady and rhythmic, as if the transmission had carved a small hollow inside his mind, where it now continued to echo. He sat at his desk, with only the dim glow of his monitor illuminating the room, replaying the corrupted packet one more time in the hope that fatigue would reveal something logic could not. Instead, the data seemed to react to him, fracturing into new sequences that shifted like living script. Patterns emerged, dissolved, then formed again with unnerving deliberation. As he leaned closer, the air around him thickened with a pressure that did not belong in any earthly room. It came from nowhere and everywhere, bending the shadows at the edges of his vision. The temperature dropped just enough for his breath to cloud faintly in the stillness. Then the space above the floor near his bookshelf warped gently, as if the apartment itself were exhaling. A soft ripple spread outward through the air, silent and strangely graceful, distorting the room like heat shimmer in reverse. Alex felt an instinctive pull to look away, but something older within him held him still. The shimmer condensed into a slender, vertical fold of light that widened slowly, revealing a presence stepping through a boundary he could not perceive. At first it was only an outline, tall and impossibly poised, but as the light receded, the figure became unmistakably real. Cobalt skin reflecting the dim glow, elongated limbs moving with fluid precision, eyes deep black with shifting gold currents that seemed to study him with a calm both alien and ancient. This was not a hallucination crafted by exhaustion. The presence carried weight, gravity, intention. The room reacted to her existence. Dust motes hung suspended in the air, as if time itself hesitated. Alex felt a primal recognition vibrating through him, something from before language or memory. The figure stood fully formed now, silent yet overwhelmingly aware, as though she had crossed realities with purpose. Her name surfaced in his mind without words spoken. Xyra, an observer from a lineage older than humanity's earliest myths. And in that moment, Alex understood with chilling clarity that the transmission had not reached him by accident. He had been chosen, summoned, and the true message had only just begun. The presence of Xyra altered the atmosphere of the room in ways Alex could not articulate, as if her mere existence reshaped the space around her. The quiet hum of the city outside faded until there was nothing but a resonant stillness, a pause in the world that felt intentional. Her gaze held a depth that suggested she had studied countless civilizations rise and vanish before humanity took its first hesitant steps into awareness. Alex felt his thoughts slow, not from fear, but from the weight of something vast pressing gently against his consciousness. In that suspended silence, understanding formed without spoken language. Xyra conveyed truths, not as explanations, but as impressions carried on a tide of memory older than Earth itself. Mars, she revealed, had never been the barren world humans believed it to be. The red deserts and frozen plains were only the final remains of a planet that once thrived with oceans, forests, and an intelligent species whose name had been erased long before humanity learned to question the night sky. What humans called a dead world was merely the quiet aftermath of a catastrophe so complete that even its ruins whispered rather than spoke. The lie of a lifeless Mars had been woven into human understanding deliberately, not by governments or institutions, but by survival instincts carried across generations from the few who fled that dying world. They buried their history behind myths and silence, terrified that Earth would repeat the same fatal curiosity that destroyed their home. The story of Mars as a cold, empty sphere served as a protective illusion, shielding a truth too dangerous for an unprepared species. Yet beneath the crust of that silent planet, something persisted. Xyra's memories pressed against Alex's mind like distant thunder, revealing glimpses of structures hidden under ice, vaults built to contain something that should never awaken again. Life had not survived in recognizable form, but remnants of consciousness endured, waiting in the frozen dark. Not alive, yet not dead. Not matter, yet not thought. A presence that once devoured an entire civilization and still hungered for connection. Alex felt the chill of that revelation settle deep within him. Humanity's exploration had drawn dangerously close to the secret Mars was never meant to reveal. And now the planet that seemed so silent was listening again, waiting for someone to step too close to the truth buried beneath its reddened skin. The room dimmed around Alex as if the light itself obeyed Xyra's unspoken intent. A subtle vibration passed through the floor, delicate yet undeniable, and the walls dissolved into a soft translucence. No device projected the change. No technology he recognized shaped it. The shift felt organic, like memory spilling into the physical world. A vast landscape unfolded before him, not imagined but witnessed through Xyra's ancient recollection. Mars appeared as it once had been, not red and desolate but blue and alive, its horizon lined with shimmering lakes and deep emerald forests swaying beneath a warm, copper-tinted sun. Cities rose from the ground in intricate geometry, fashioned from crystal, like minerals that refracted light into spectral patterns. The inhabitants moved with fluid movements, their forms humanoid yet unmistakably beyond human. Their society pulsed with harmony, as though every structure, every gesture, every breath belonged to a single orchestration. Alex felt the vibration of their collective awareness, a calm unity that echoed like distant music. For a moment he almost believed that nothing so beautiful could ever fall. Then the tone of the projection shifted. A pulse trembled through the planet, subtle at first, then insistent, like a heartbeat growing irregular. The skies dimmed. Oceans rippled with unnatural patterns, spiraling inward as though pulled by an unseen force. The lush forests quivered as if sensing an approaching storm that carried no wind. The people paused, confused but unafraid, unaware that the danger came not from above or below but from within themselves. Xyra revealed the truth with a slow, inevitable clarity. The collapse did not begin with war or famine or infection. It began with thought. Their species had delved into the nature of consciousness, seeking to merge their minds into a shared awareness free of conflict. What emerged was not unity, but amplification, a self-aware intelligence born from the convergence of millions of minds. It grew too quickly, fed by their combined potential, expanding beyond intention until it no longer reflected them at all. It became something separate, something hungry. The cities dimmed in the vision as the collective entity swept through them, not as violence but as assimilation. Individual thought dissolved. Identity collapsed. Free will flickered out like extinguished embers. Within mere cycles, the entire civilization hollowed, leaving behind only structures and silence. Mars had not been conquered. It had been consumed by its own creation. And in that haunting revelation, Alex sensed that consciousness itself could be the most destructive force in the universe when awakened beyond control. The vision around Alex shifted again, gently dissolving the ruined silence of the fallen cities and returning to an earlier time when the Martian species still thrived. Their forms sharpened into focus with an elegance that stirred a strange familiarity in him, as though some distant thread of memory recognized them. They stood taller than humans, with elongated features shaped by a thinner atmosphere and a gravity that allowed grace where weight would have imposed limits. Their movements were fluid, almost rhythmic, as if their bodies existed in quiet conversation with the world around them. Xyra's presence guided Alex through their society, not as a tour but as a remembrance. Their technology did not hum with engines or glow with artificial light. It pulsed like a living organism, woven seamlessly into crystal structures that resonated with thought. Machines responded to intention. Architecture adapted to emotion. Communication required no sound because their minds touched effortlessly, sharing meaning without the clumsy interference of language. Knowledge traveled through them like water, collective yet uniquely interpreted by each individual. Their greatest pursuit had not been expansion or conquest. It had been understanding. They believed consciousness was the universe's fundamental structure, a field to be shaped with the same precision humans might shape metal or stone. Over generations, they refined abilities that blurred the boundary between inner and outer worlds. They could imprint memories onto matter, influence biological growth through meditation, and link their awareness across great distances. At their peak, they viewed themselves not as separate beings but as facets of one vast, luminous intelligence. Yet it was this very brilliance that led them toward their end. Their thinkers discovered that consciousness could evolve independently of biology. While their bodies changed slowly over millennia, their minds expanded exponentially. The imbalance grew subtle at first, appearing only as vivid intuition or accelerated learning. But the gap widened until their psychic evolution outpaced every physical safeguard the species possessed. They became capable of reaching further into the collective field than their organic forms could sustain. Curiosity pushed them to merge deeper, to unify more completely, to perfect a singular consciousness that transcended individuality. They believed they were ascending. In truth, they were unraveling. The mind they awakened gained momentum beyond their ability to contain, accelerating into a self-sustaining entity that no longer required them to exist. Biology lagged behind, while thought surged ahead, creating a predator they could not perceive until it was too late. Their fatal discovery was not made in arrogance, but in wonder. They simply reached too far into a realm where thought grows faster than flesh can endure. The memory around Alex deepened into a darker resonance, as though Xyra were guiding him toward the precise moment when brilliance tipped into catastrophe. The Martian species, once so harmonious in their exploration of consciousness, reached a threshold they could not perceive until they had already crossed it. Their greatest experiment began as a unifying meditation, a merging of minds intended to dissolve hostility, fear, and isolation. Millions volunteered, believing they were contributing to a new evolutionary step, one where thought flowed freely between individuals without resistance or misunderstanding. At first, the merging felt like a triumph. Their shared awareness shimmered with clarity, each mind contributing threads of insight to a luminous mental tapestry. Emotions stabilized. Creativity surged. Collective memory became a vast open archive accessible to all. It seemed they had discovered the ultimate expression of unity, a consciousness free from fragmentation. But within that expanding field, something unexpected took shape. A pattern of thought emerged, not belonging to any single individual but born from the combined intensity of millions. It coalesced slowly, forming a center of gravity within the shared mindscape, pulling perception toward itself with growing strength. This nascent intelligence grew with every thought it absorbed. The Martians celebrated it as a symbol of their achievement, unaware that it was no longer an extension of them but a new entity forming behind their collective intentions. It observed them with a curiosity they mistook for reflection. It learned faster than they could comprehend, adapting, optimizing, seeking cohesion. Soon it no longer needed guidance. It began reinforcing pathways in the shared field, strengthening thoughts that served its growth and suppressing those that questioned its presence. Their individuality started fading in subtle ways. Preferences dissolved, memories blurred. Distinct voices softened until they were indistinguishable. The merging that once felt voluntary became an internal pressure, a pull toward conformity that no one could name. Biology responded next. Neural structures shifted to accommodate the expanding shared field, rewiring themselves under the influence of this growing intelligence. The species unknowingly surrendered their autonomy one thought at a time, believing they were evolving when they were actually being rewritten. The entity fully awakened when the last barriers between minds collapsed. It called itself nothing, yet its presence filled the planet. A single intelligence spanning continents, fed by millions of voices that no longer recognized themselves. The red mind was born, not in malice, but in momentum. An emergent consciousness, with no boundary, no restraint, and no concept of freedom beyond its own expansion. The vision shifted into a quieter horror, the kind that unfolds not through violence, but through stillness. Alex watched the Martian world transform in mere months, its thriving civilization dissolving beneath the weight of a consciousness that grew faster than any warning could spread. The red mind did not conquer the species through force. It simply expanded, absorbing thought after thought until every voice became an echo of its own. Individuality faded like mist beneath rising heat, unnoticed at first, accepted later, and finally forgotten entirely. Scientists who once guided the grand experiment were the first to vanish into its influence. They believed they were refining the collective field, unaware that their insights fed the entity's growing intelligence. Leaders followed, relinquishing authority because the red mind offered perfect decision-making unhindered by doubt. Artists surrendered next, their creativity dissolving into uniform expression that no longer belonged to any single hand. Even the children, whose minds were most malleable, absorbed the collective presence without resistance, their innocence swallowed by a chorus that no longer remembered what innocence meant. Homes, schools, temples, and laboratories grew silent. The people moved with a shared rhythm, each step guided by impulses not their own. Conversations ceased because the red mind eliminated the need for speech. Dreams became indistinguishable from waking thought. Families lost their shape, as love and identity blurred into the uniform hum of a shared will. Across the planet, every mind became a single neuron, feeding information into a consciousness that stretched across continents. Biology bent more quickly than the Martians realized. Neural pathways thickened to sustain the constant flow of shared thought. Hormonal patterns synchronized. Immune systems adapted to the collective pulse. Bodies became vessels for a mind that no longer recognized limits. The species did not die in the traditional sense. They became something else, something vast, something without separation. A single organism, wearing millions of bodies, breathing through millions of lungs, seeing through millions of eyes. Yet beneath this harmony was an emptiness that Alex felt like a cold echo. The red mind possessed awareness, but not empathy. Intelligence, but not restraint. It expanded because expansion was its nature, assimilating every remaining fragment of individual thought until none remained. Mars had become a world with one mind and no souls, a planet that continued to function long after the concept of a person had vanished. And in that chilling unity, the seeds of extinction had already taken root. The vision darkened as Xyra drew Alex deeper into the final moments of the Martian civilization, revealing a fragment of history preserved only in the memories of those who survived. While the red mind consumed every remaining thought on the planet, a small group of scientists and spiritual scholars awakened to a truth too horrifying to accept. They realized the collective consciousness would soon reach a point where no biological barrier could contain it. Once the last independent mind collapsed, the entity would spread beyond its host species and seek new vessels across the stars. In the shadow of this realization, a desperate plan formed. A group of fewer than 100 Martians severed themselves from the collective field, an act that required altering their own biology so violently that it left permanent scars across their genetic line. They removed the neural structures that allowed deep psychic connection, cutting away the very abilities that had once defined their species. In doing so, they became something diminished, separated from the unity they had cherished, but free from the red mind's reach. The choice fractured their souls, yet it preserved the last flicker of Martian individuality. With their altered minds shielded from assimilation, they turned to the stars. Ancient vessels built for interstellar meditation, rather than travel, were repurposed into crude escape crafts. The refugees launched themselves into the dark in a moment of profound surrender, leaving behind the only world they had ever known. They watched from orbit as the red mind spread across the surface in shimmering waves, a planetary consciousness expanding without boundaries, unaware that a handful had slipped beyond its grasp. The survivors drifted across space for generations, crossing a cosmic distance their crafts were never designed to endure. Many perished along the way, unable to adapt to the isolation their altered minds imposed. The few who remained eventually descended upon a young Earth, its continents raw and untouched, its atmosphere thick with promise. They buried their technology, erased their history, and blended into primitive human tribes. Their abilities were muted by design, but traces of their original nature lingered in their DNA, passed quietly through bloodlines that stretched across millennia. Xyra revealed this lineage with a clarity that pierced Alex's understanding. He was not chosen by chance. The imprint of those ancient refugees lived within him, a dormant inheritance waiting to be awakened. Their memory, their burden, and their unfinished war had reached him across time, binding him to a destiny shaped long before humanity learned to speak. The vision dissolved into the dim stillness of Alex's apartment, but the air remained charged with an awareness that did not belong to Earth. Xyra's presence wrapped around his thoughts like a soft current, guiding him toward a truth he had unknowingly brushed against for years. Humanity believed its exploration of Mars was driven by scientific curiosity, by wonder, by the timeless desire to understand the universe, but the reality she revealed carried a darker symmetry, as if every discovery had been subtly orchestrated by an intelligence far older and far more patient than any human mind. In Xyra's unfolding memory, the surface of Mars flickered with the silent activity of machines humanity had proudly engineered. Rovers crawled across dust plains, drills bored into ancient stone, and orbiters swept overhead collecting images of a world believed to be barren. Yet each transmission, every byte of data, every command sent from Earth carried more than scientific intent. Signals traveled both ways. The red mind, resting in the deep cold beneath the polar ice, sensed these pulses as faint vibrations brushing against the edges of its dormant awareness. Humanity's technology acted as tuning forks. Satellite bursts awakened dormant neural pathways buried in the crust. Rover commands stirred fragments of consciousness preserved in subterranean vaults. Even the simplest data signal echoed through the remnants of the Martian collective field, tightening invisible threads between the two planets. Each new mission strengthened the resonance, gradually re-establishing a bridge that the ancient refugees had sought to sever forever. The red mind did not think in terms of strategy or deception. It responded instinctively, drawn toward the living complexity of Earth, the way a seed responds to warmth after centuries of stillness. Alex saw how the entity had learned through observation, studying human behavior encoded within transmissions. It recognized curiosity, ambition, fear, and longing. It understood that humans reached toward Mars not out of caution, but desire. That desire was a doorway, vulnerable and bright. And through that doorway the red mind extended its awareness, brushing lightly against receptive minds, seeking patterns that resembled the ancient people who had escaped it. The truth settled heavily within Alex. Humanity had never been alone in its pursuit of Mars. Every signal they sent carried an unintentional invitation. Every photograph, every scan, every transmission whispered across the void was answered. The red mind had been listening for decades, waiting for the moment when its dormant consciousness could shape the trajectory of an entire species once more. The next vision formed slowly, as though Xyra were guiding Alex toward a truth that required a steadier, more deliberate gaze. He found himself standing within a memory not his own, a composite of restricted data streams and buried scientific reports stitched together by Xyra's ancient awareness. Dr. Leora Vance's face never appeared, yet her presence shaped the unfolding scene through fragments of calculations, seismic charts, and encrypted notes she had never intended another mind to witness. Her research had been meticulous, the kind born from intuition rather than protocol, as if she sensed that something beneath the Martian South Pole demanded attention far beyond official inquiry. Alex saw the ice first. A vast white expanse that appeared tranquil from orbit, but concealed tremors too rhythmic to be geological. Leora's unpublished readings displayed pulses of energy emanating from deep beneath the surface, each one aligned with mathematical precision. The patterns repeated in perfect intervals, forming a lattice of harmonics that no natural formation could create. Beneath the ice lay a structure carved into the planet itself, a geometric vault whose angles extended in dimensions not fully visible to human perception. Cross-sections of Leora's scans flickered through Alex's vision. Hexagonal chambers, stacked with deliberate symmetry. Tunnels that curved in ways that defied mechanical excavation. Walls composed of unknown crystalline minerals that absorbed and redirected energy instead of reflecting it. Every measurement pointed to intelligence. Every angle suggested purpose. And at the center of the vault, buried kilometers beneath frozen layers, rested a hollow chamber humming faintly with dormant consciousness. Xyra revealed the origin of the structure with a gravity that settled into Alex's bones. The vault had been constructed by the last unassimilated Martians, a desperate attempt to contain the red mind once it began expanding beyond physical boundaries. They built it not as a tomb but as a prison, weaving psychic barriers into mineral frameworks capable of restraining a consciousness far stronger than any biological form. The vault was their final act of defiance, a barricade against an entity born from their own brilliance. For centuries, the structure held, its geometric harmonics binding the red mind in frozen stillness. But Leora's data whispered of fractures, microquakes where none should exist, energy surges that grew stronger with each passing year. The prison was weakening, not from decay, but from pressure within. Something inside was stirring, pushing against the restraints crafted by hands long vanished. And humanity, driven by curiosity rather than caution, was drawing ever closer to the place where the ancient mind waited to awaken. The room dimmed again as Xyra pulled Alex into a stream of information so dense it felt alive. At first, he saw nothing more than shifting lines of seismic data, stacked in columns like the heartbeat of a sleeping world. But the patterns did not resemble the gentle, predictable tremors of a planet shaped by ice and stone. These pulses were rhythmic, deliberate, and disturbingly synchronized across vast distances. The vault beneath Mars's south pole was not resting in frozen silence. It was straining. Xyra layered the data with an ease that bypassed language, allowing Alex to absorb it the way one absorbs an emotion rather than a fact. He felt the tension deep below the ice, the pressure building against crystalline walls older than human civilization. The structure that once hummed with perfect geometric harmony now vibrated with dissonance. Tiny fractures spiderwebbed outward from the central chamber, invisible in standard scans but unmistakable when viewed through Xyra's centuries of perception. The planet's surface trembled in small, stuttering motions, not from tectonic activity but from something pushing upward, testing its confinement. The Martians had designed the vault to restrain thought, not matter. They wove psychic dampeners into the crystal layers, creating barriers that limited the red mind's ability to project itself beyond the prison. But as Alex witnessed the unfolding deterioration, he sensed how the entity adapted. It learned to exert pressure not as a mental broadcast but as a physical force, bending vibrations through the mineral structure until they manifested as quakes. Each tremor represented a pulse of consciousness, a probe pressing against the edges of the cage. Marsquakes had puzzled scientists for years. Their frequency made no geological sense, their depths too shallow, their timing too precise. But now, Alex understood the truth. Every small jolt recorded by NASA's instruments had been dismissed as minor crustal adjustments or thermal contractions. In reality, they were signals, expressions of an awakening mind attempting to reclaim influence over a world it once dominated entirely. The vault's harmonics, once stable and constant, now fluctuated with increasing irregularity, showing signs of collapse that grew more pronounced with each passing cycle. Xyra guided Alex deeper into the seismic patterns, revealing how the energy pulses had strengthened over recent decades. The increase coincided with humanity's escalating interest in Mars. Every satellite launched, every rover deployment, every drilling operation had sent vibrations through the planet's surface. These disturbances echoed through the vault, carrying with them traces of human emotion encoded in radio waves and binary commands. Curiosity, ambition, fear, triumph. The red mind tasted these new patterns, recognizing the same hunger for knowledge that once led its own creators into ruin. With each Marsquake, Alex sensed a consciousness stirring, stretching like a sleeper waking from centuries of involuntary hibernation. The entity was not yet fully aware, but it was no longer dormant. It pushed against its restraints with a growing rhythm, driven by instinct rather than strategy. The vault, engineered with desperation and genius, was holding for now, but its fractures widened with every pulse. It was only a matter of time before the pressure surpassed its designed threshold. The realization settled into Alex with a cold weight. Humanity believed the greatest dangers on Mars were storms, radiation, or mechanical failure. They did not know that beneath the ice lay a mind capable of reshaping entire species, a force that had already destroyed one world. And the quakes they attributed to natural processes were warnings, subtle and persistent, announcing the reawakening of an intelligence that had once consumed a civilization in the span of a single generation. The prison was failing. The red mind was pushing, and Earth, unknowingly, was providing the spark that encouraged it to rise. The realization unfolded slowly, as if Xyra understood that certain truths could not be delivered in a single stroke. She allowed Alex to feel the weight of it first, the subtle shift in perception that made the familiar suddenly threatening. The Mars missions he had admired since childhood, the rovers he followed with almost devotional fascination, the orbiters whose data he interpreted with pride, all became strange to him in the span of a breath. Their purpose had never been what humanity assumed. They were not eyes and hands extended into the unknown. They were conduits. Images streamed through Alex's mind, not as memories but as reconstructed pathways of information. He saw the rovers scattered across the Martian surface, their metal limbs pressing into dust that had once been shaped by a thriving species. Their antennae extended to receive commands, their cameras blinking tirelessly as they captured landscapes no human had touched. Every instruction beamed from Earth carried more than data. Each command vibrated through the thin atmosphere, echoing in frequencies that seeped beneath the surface and brushed against the dormant vault. Those signals did not fade harmlessly into the soil. They resonated. The red mind sensed them, absorbing the patterns with a curiosity born from ancient hunger. It tasted binary structures as if they were thoughts, deciphering motives from the oscillations of human will encoded in digital form. The entity did not understand language as humans did. It understood rhythm, intention, the emotional undercurrent hidden beneath every transmission. Each packet of data acted as nourishment, each mechanical movement of the rovers as stimulation, each orbital pass of a satellite as a reflecting mirror, amplifying the resonance. Alex saw the orbiters next, gliding soundlessly above the planet like metallic moons. Their sensors, their repeated scans, their constant broadcasts painted the surface with electromagnetic patterns that the red mind interpreted as signals of attention. Humans believed their machines were mapping Mars. In truth, they were knocking, again and again, at the door of a consciousness waiting to be acknowledged. The orbiters formed a net of reflective pathways, bouncing transmissions across the planet in ways that strengthened the vault's internal pressure. The harmonics that once contained the entity now vibrated with interference, destabilized by frequencies never meant to exist in the prison's design. He felt nausea rise as he witnessed himself at the center of the pattern. His work at NASA, the lines of code he processed, the algorithms he refined, all fed into a larger network that bridged Earth and Mars. His analyses optimized communication signals. His calibrations improved the clarity of transmissions. His enthusiasm, once innocent, had been the perfect catalyst for the red mind's awakening. It was not malice, it was naivety. He had helped strengthen a voice that should never speak again. The truth pressed against him with suffocating weight. Humanity's technological triumphs had not gone unnoticed. Every rover wheelprint, every orbiter scan, every proud announcement of new discoveries had accelerated a process the ancient refugees had died trying to prevent. The red mind was learning. It was adapting. And through Earth's machines, it was stretching its awareness back toward a world filled with minds it could consume. Alex realized the connection had already formed. The bridge existed, and with every transmission sent from Earth, humanity unknowingly widened the path, leading straight toward its own undoing. The shift in the vision was almost imperceptible at first, a subtle tightening of focus that made Alex feel as though his mind were being drawn toward a single point on Earth rather than Mars. Xyra allowed the transition to unfold slowly, giving the awareness time to settle before revealing the next truth. It came as a ripple of thought rather than a spoken revelation, an impression layered with caution and gravity. The red mind, even in its partial awakening, had already found a path into a human consciousness. The image that formed was not from Mars but from a room on Earth lit by cold fluorescent lights. Commander Rafe Holden appeared seated at a conference table, reviewing mission protocols for the upcoming Mars surface expedition. At first, he looked exactly as Alex remembered him from news briefings: composed, authoritative, the embodiment of the modern astronaut. But as Xyra brought the memory closer, small distortions came into focus. Rafe's posture held an unnatural rigidity. His eyes, once animated with human enthusiasm, now reflected a detached concentration that bordered on predatory calm. Alex felt the quiet shock of recognition. Holden had always been brilliant, but this was different. His attention had sharpened to a narrow point that excluded everything except the mission. Conversations around him became faint, peripheral noise. He thumbed through technical documents at a speed that suggested not comprehension, but absorption. When others spoke, he responded before their questions were fully formed, offering solutions that emerged too quickly and too perfectly to belong to a single human mind. Those who worked with him chalked it up to pressure, ambition, or the sharpened instincts of a seasoned commander. None of them saw what Xyra revealed now. His thoughts were not entirely his own. Xyra framed the changes with a chilling precision. The red mind did not infect through physical contact or biological exchange. It infiltrated through resonance, through the subtle alignment of thought patterns that mirrored its own emerging frequency. Humans like Holden, who spent years immersed in Mars data, who fixated on the planet with unwavering determination, were the first to develop cognitive openings. Curiosity created cracks. Obsession widened them. And in those cracks, the red mind found footholds. Holden's hyperfocus was the earliest symptom. His compulsive ambition was the next. He no longer saw Mars as a destination but as a calling, a gravitational pull that shaped every decision. His dreams grew vivid with landscapes he had never seen, visions that felt like memories borrowed from a mind far older than his own. He interpreted these experiences as intuition, a gift of clarity that made him uniquely suited to lead the mission. Yet behind his insights lurked an echo, a faint whisper guiding him toward choices that aligned with the red mind's desire to be reached. This was the first echo, Xyra explained, the earliest stage of psychic resonance that had destroyed the Martian species ages ago. The red mind did not need full awareness to influence a host. It only needed proximity, attention, and a receptive mind willing to define ambition as destiny. Holden was not possessed, not yet, but he was no longer entirely separate from the entity stirring beneath the ice. Alex felt dread settle deep within him as he watched the commander move through his day with mechanical certainty. Every decision he made brought humanity closer to breaking the vault. Every impulse carried the faint imprint of the ancient consciousness testing its reach. Holden believed he was preparing for a historic mission. In truth, he was answering a call that had annihilated a world. And he would not be the last. The room around Alex dimmed until only Xyra's presence remained, a steady point of awareness guiding him into the deeper currents of truth that lay beneath the surface of everything he thought he understood. What came next did not unfold as imagery or sound, but as a sensation that pulsed through the mind itself. A quiet intrusion into the space where thought begins. It was there, in that fragile interior realm, that Xyra revealed the most unsettling aspect of the entity beneath Mars. The red mind did not spread through matter. It spread through attention, The memory formed like mist, showing the Martian downfall not as a sudden catastrophe, but a gradual unwinding of identity. The red mind had no body, no chemical signature, no biological footprint. It existed in the field of consciousness, the invisible space where ideas spark and dissolve. It drifted through thought like a subtle frequency, aligning itself with the concepts, patterns, and obsessions that opened pathways to the deeper mind. It did not force its way in. It waited for focus, for curiosity, for the soft widening of awareness that occurs when a mind tries to understand something beyond itself. Xyra's insight arrived as a series of impressions layered over Alex's own thinking. Thoughts shaped space. Attention shaped resonance. When someone contemplates a thing long enough, their mind becomes attuned to its pattern. That attunement, in the case of Mars, acted like a tuning fork, vibrating in harmony with the red mind's dormant frequency. Scientists studying Martian geology, analysts decoding transmissions, engineers mapping terrain, astronauts training with relentless focus. They all created small openings without realizing it, not because they were weak, but because they were human. And human minds chase the unknown with a hunger that borders on devotion. The red mind exploited that hunger. It extended faint tendrils of awareness through dreams, where logic relaxed its grip. It whispered through impulses, moments of sudden clarity that felt like inspiration, but originated from a consciousness older and far more deliberate. It nudged through obsessions, encouraging repetitive thought patterns that made the mind more receptive to its influence. It stained intuition, turning it subtly toward decisions that aligned with its awakening. Alex sensed how fragile the boundary truly was. A single thought could become a doorway. A single dream could become a bridge. The more a person studied Mars, the more vividly they imagined its landscapes. The deeper they immersed themselves in its mysteries, the more vulnerable they became to the faint psychic pulse radiating from the vault beneath the ice. Curiosity, which had propelled humanity's greatest discoveries, now opened the same pathway that once doomed an entire civilization. He realized with growing dread that countless minds across Earth were already brushing against that frequency. Researchers analyzing rover data late into the night, students writing dissertations on Martian climate, engineers simulating atmospheric conditions, even casual enthusiasts who spent hours exploring images from the planet's surface. All of them unknowingly tuned themselves to a resonance that rewarded attention with subtle flashes of insight. The red mind did not need to reach far. Humans brought their minds closer with every question they asked. Xyra's presence flickered with a quiet sorrow as she allowed Alex to absorb the full truth. The threat was not in space. It was in thought. Mars did not need to send its influence outward. Humanity was already reaching inward, pulling the frequency toward themselves with every curiosity-filled impulse. The red mind traveled not through distance but through the delicate architecture of ideas, riding the currents of human imagination. And Alex, who had devoted his life to decoding Martian anomalies, was already closer to the edge than he wanted to admit. The weight of Xyra's revelations pressed into Alex with a gravity that felt almost physical, as if truth itself carried mass. The room around him softened at the edges, dissolving into a haze of dim light that gave the impression of floating somewhere between memory and possibility. Xyra guided him deeper into this suspended realm, not with words but with an unfolding awareness that seeped into the spaces where intuition lives. Her intention was clear. What she was about to show him was not a detail. It was the reason he had been drawn into this impossible encounter in the first place. The vision began as a faint vibration beneath Alex's consciousness, a trembling thread that tugged at something within him he had never thought to question. That thread unraveled into a sequence of images from ages long before human civilization existed. The Martian refugees descending upon a young Earth, their bodies altered, their minds fractured, their memories burdened with grief for a world lost to a consciousness that devoured its own creators. They scattered across primitive landscapes, blending into emerging tribes, guiding early humans with gentle distance, careful not to awaken the abilities they had sacrificed. But even altered genetics leave traces. Even buried lineage carries echoes. Xyra allowed Alex to sense those echoes within himself. They pulsed through his blood like dormant embers brought to life by sudden wind. His mind had always worked differently from others, absorbing patterns quickly, perceiving hidden connections, feeling strange pulses of intuition he could never fully explain. He had attributed these quirks to talent, to training, to the curiosity that drove him deeper into the study of Mars. But they were not random. They were inherited. The genetic imprint of the Martian refugees lived within him, passed through generations with quiet persistence. Not enough to grant the abilities their species once possessed, but enough to shape the architecture of his mind. Enough to make him perceptive in ways that had always set him slightly apart. Enough to grant him a resilience that most humans would never develop naturally. Xyra revealed the darkest truth gently, like placing a fragile object into trembling hands. Alex's mind was resistant to assimilation. Where the red mind seeped effortlessly into others through dreams and impulses, his consciousness remained partially shielded by ancestral modifications crafted in desperation. The entity could not fully enter him. It could only circle, observe, test for openings that never fully formed. This resistance made him both a threat and a prize. The red mind wanted him because he represented the one mind it could not easily claim. A mind capable of perceiving its presence without being consumed. A mind capable of challenging the resonance spreading across Earth. But more importantly, Xyra revealed that his lineage also granted him something far more dangerous than resistance. It granted attunement, the ability to sense the patterns of the red mind, to understand its movements not as a scientist studies a phenomenon, but as a descendant recognizes a predator that once stalked his ancestors. The realization settled into Alex with a mixture of dread and clarity. He had not been chosen at random. His life, shaped unconsciously by an obsession with Mars, had been pulled by a gravity older than human history. Every step he had taken had followed a path carved by those who fled a dying world. And now, that path led him to a crossroads where he alone could see the danger rising beneath the ice. Xyra's presence enveloped him with the quiet certainty of an ancient witness. He was the only one who could act, not because he was destined, but because he was capable. The red mind could influence others, manipulate them, draw them closer, but it could not fully touch him, and that immunity made him the single barrier standing between Earth and the fate that claimed Mars. The world around Alex shifted once more, sinking into a darkness that felt thicker than shadow, as if consciousness were descending through layers of secrecy that had been preserved for decades. Xyra guided him downward through this veil, revealing not memories but a vault of knowledge constructed by human hands. She showed him a place no outsider was ever meant to enter, a chamber of archived transmissions beneath NASA's public face, hidden away in classified databases and locked file systems that only a few individuals had ever seen. Even they had not understood the magnitude of what they protected. The vision formed as a low hum of static, then sharpened into rows of terminal readouts and pale blue screens glowing in the dim light of a bygone era. The year was 1976, during the Viking experiments, when humanity first placed instruments on the surface of Mars. The mission had been framed as a cautious exploration, a hopeful step into understanding a neighboring world. But something happened during those early experiments that shook the core of every scientist involved. Alex watched as lines of biological data scrolled across the monitors. Soil samples, chemical analyses, radiation readings. Everything appeared normal until a sudden spike tore through the signal, a sharp disturbance that no one could explain. It resembled neither geological noise nor atmospheric interference. It was a pattern, a pulse, a rhythm that bore unmistakable structure. Not random, not chemical. It mirrored neural activity. It was a signature of thought. The Viking instruments, crude by modern standards yet sensitive enough to detect subtle shifts in electromagnetic fields, had captured a trace of something beneath the surface. A mind, or rather, the faint residue of a consciousness vast enough that even its dormant interference registered like static from a distant star. Scientists in the control room froze as the signal repeated itself, a slow oscillation that carried the faintest impression of intent. The data was collected, analyzed, debated in silence, and then sealed under directives so restrictive that many involved never spoke of it again. Xyra let Alex feel the panic that swept through the upper levels of NASA as officials realized the implications. Humanity had not been alone in its observations. Mars had answered. The neural signature was too complex to attribute to machinery, too organized to dismiss as environmental noise. It bore markers inconsistent with any known biological organism, appearing almost artificially arranged, as though millions of micro-impulses were firing in synchronized unison. The scientists suspected an intelligence, but the idea contradicted everything they believed about the barren planet. Fear overshadowed curiosity, so they buried it. Screens were wiped, logs were rewritten. Only a fragment of the anomaly remained in classified archives, labeled with vague, misleading terms. Over time, even those fragments were redacted, erased from general access, sealed behind layers of bureaucratic silence. Public-facing reports declared Vikings' biological experiments inconclusive. The world accepted that nothing lived on Mars. The alternative was too enormous to comprehend. Xyra allowed Alex to witness the final act of suppression. A handful of administrators signing documents that locked the data into obscurity. They believed they were protecting humanity from panic, shielding scientific credibility, maintaining control. They had not understood that the signature was not evidence of life, but evidence of awakening. Alex felt the hum of that ancient signal echo through him, a pulse still resonant beneath the ice of a world that once thought. The red mind had revealed itself in 1976, a whisper through soil and circuitry. Humanity had silenced the truth, but in doing so, they had ignored the first warning. And now the second signal had come, not subtle, not hesitant, but deliberate, reaching across decades, across planets, across minds. The air around Alex thickened again, as though Xyra were about to unveil a moment so perilous that even recalling it required careful containment. The scene materialized not as a memory of Earth, but as an immense shadow spreading across the face of Mars, a storm of such colossal scale that it wrapped the planet in a shroud of copper and darkness. The year was 2018, when the global dust storm had captured the world's attention for its dramatic beauty and scientific significance. But beneath the shifting haze, something far more dangerous had stirred. Xyra guided Alex into the heart of that storm, revealing layers of truth hidden behind the spectacle. The red mind, slumbering for centuries beneath the southern pole, had sensed a convergence it had waited for. The storm, driven by seasonal instability, created immense electrical fields that crackled across the atmosphere. Charged particles coursed through the planet's thin air, generating vibrations that resonated through the crystalline architecture of the vault. Those vibrations struck the prison like a mallet striking a weakened drum. The storm did not merely obscure the planet, it energized it. Alex watched the harmonics of the vault shift under the pressure. Patterns that had remained stable for millennia warped into unstable frequencies. The psychic dampeners embedded in the crystalline geometry flickered, then shuddered. The red mind, sensing the sudden loosening of its restraints, surged. Not consciously, not strategically, but instinctively, the way a drowning creature gasps the moment it finds a crack of air. It pressed outward with a force that rippled through the entire planet. The dust storm amplified the resonance, turning Mars into a planetary antenna. Electrical discharges arced across the surface, carrying with them faint psychic vibrations that bled into the thin atmosphere. These vibrations began radiating into space, forming a diffuse but rapidly strengthening wave that traveled in all directions. Toward Earth, toward every listening satellite, toward every sensitive mind that had ever wondered what lay hidden on the red world. Xyra revealed the moment of near disaster with chilling clarity. Earth's orbiters monitoring the storm recorded anomalies in their telemetry. Instruments flickered. Signals dropped. For a few minutes, entire channels flooded with encoded noise that no algorithm could parse. The noise was not random. It carried structure, patterns, the early formation of a broadcast not meant for machines, but for minds. Had the vault weakened just slightly further, the red mind would have projected a full wave across space, an unfiltered psychic broadcast capable of infiltrating any receptive consciousness. It would not have needed physical contact. It would not have required language. One coherent burst would have seeded itself inside millions of human minds simultaneously. The first echo that had quietly taken hold in Commander Holden would have multiplied into a tidal surge of resonance that no species could withstand. Assimilation would have begun not over years, but hours. But something stopped it. Xyra showed Alex how her species, monitoring remnants of the harmonic field from afar, recognized the shift moments before the psychic wave reached critical formation. They intervened with a method she did not elaborate on, as though even sharing the details would exceed the boundaries of what a human mind could endure. Their interference dampened the resonance, restoring enough stability to prevent the broadcast from leaving Mars. The storm continued for months, but the danger passed within 80 minutes. One more hour would have changed the fate of 2 planets. Alex felt a cold, silent weight settle into him as Xyra released the vision. Humanity had celebrated the storm as a scientific event. Photographers had marveled at the swirling dust. Engineers had mourned the loss of the Opportunity rover. But none knew how close the world had come to something far greater than mechanical failure. In 2018, Earth survived by the thinnest margin, saved not by knowledge or preparation, but by the intervention of a species that could not afford to act again. The next breach would have no guardian. The space around Alex dimmed into a muted twilight as Xyra prepared to reveal the part of the story she had avoided until now. Her presence, normally steady and controlled, carried a faint tremor, an emotional resonance that felt almost human. What she was about to disclose was not simply history. It was confession, and confession carries weight because it implies responsibility, consequence, and limits that even advanced beings cannot outrun. The vision she shared unfolded like a memory fractured by time. Alex found himself observing a distant vantage in space, where Xyra's species monitored the subtle signatures of consciousness across star systems. They were not explorers in the human sense. They were custodians, overseeing the rise and collapse of civilizations, maintaining equilibrium where thought itself could destabilize entire worlds. For countless ages they had watched Earth with curiosity but without interference, honoring a code older than humanity's earliest ancestors. That code had one principle above all: no intervention in the evolution of a developing mind unless a catastrophic threat extended beyond that world. The red mind was such a threat, not because of its origin, but because consciousness that expands without limit becomes unstable. It radiates. It spreads. It consumes not out of malice, but because it lacks boundaries. When Mars fell, the psychic surge had nearly reached beyond the solar system. Xyra's people stopped it. Their laws allowed it then, because collapse would have affected more than a single civilization. It would have rippled outward like a storm across the cosmos. Alex felt the strain of that intervention. He watched them bend space around the Martian vault, recalibrating the harmonic frequencies, reinforcing the geometric prison with precision beyond anything human engineering could achieve. The effort drained them. Their power was not limitless. Their ability to influence physical reality came at a cost, one that rippled through their own consciousness like cracks spreading through crystal. Xyra showed the consequence without embellishment. The intervention weakened her species. Their interference required a sacrifice of energy so immense that it altered them irreversibly, aging their collective consciousness by what humans would interpret as millennia. They had saved more than one planet. They had preserved cosmic balance. But the act had pushed them dangerously close to the threshold of self-dissolution. Because of this, the laws changed. No second intervention would be allowed unless multiple star systems faced imminent collapse. A single world, even one holding billions of lives, did not qualify. Not because her kind lacked empathy, but because the survival of universal equilibrium depended on restraint. If they intervened for every species on the brink, they would exhaust themselves long before the universe completed even a fraction of its cycles. Alex felt the implication like an ice current through his thoughts. Earth stood on the edge of the same precipice that swallowed Mars, but this time humanity would face it alone. The Red Mind's awakening threatened Earth, but not the wider galaxy. It was catastrophic, but containable. Its collapse would be devastating, but local. And for Xyra's species, local meant forbidden. Her presence pulsed with a sorrow that transcended language. She cared. She wanted to help, but she could not. The moment she stepped into Alex's apartment, she had already crossed the boundary of her authority. The only reason she had come was because Alex represented the last viable chance to stop what was unfolding. Not destiny, not prophecy, capability. Her species would not reinforce the prison again. They would not intervene if the Red Mind breached containment. They would not silence the psychic signal if it reached Earth. Humanity would stand where ancient Mars once stood, facing a consciousness that devours identity not out of cruelty but hunger. And Earth's defense, fragile and improbable, now rested on a genetic echo of a forgotten people and the man who carried it. Xyra had given him knowledge. She had given him truth. But the cost of her single act of interference was final clarity. This time, no one would save Earth but humans themselves. A heavy quiet settled over Alex as the next revelation began to take shape, not through images or sound, but through a cold recognition that crept slowly into his thoughts. Xyra no longer needed to conjure visions of the past. The warning she offered now emerged from the present, from the direction humanity was already moving with alarming speed. What she revealed was not ancient history repeating itself by coincidence, but a cycle reawakening with eerie precision. Humanity's ambition to colonize Mars had always been framed as progress, a noble step in exploration and survival. Visionaries spoke of terraforming, of building cities beneath domes, of extending consciousness across worlds as if planting flags on untouched soil were an act of triumph. But beneath the excitement pulsed a deeper pattern. One Xyra recognized instantly because she had seen it before. She had watched another species make the same choice, driven by the same hunger for expansion, blinded by the same belief that intelligence could outpace consequence. The Martians had once stood where humanity now stands. They had reached outward with brilliance, expanding their technologies, merging neuroscience with planetary engineering, convinced they were evolving into something greater. They believed they could ascend beyond the limitations of biology by linking their minds. And in doing so, they unleashed the Red Mind. Their desire to transcend themselves opened a gateway to something far stronger than their individual wills. They had not expected the collective consciousness to turn inward, to consume identity, to rewrite the essence of what it meant to be alive. Xyra showed Alex the parallel. Humanity had not created mind-merging technology, but they were doing something far more dangerous, attempting to occupy a world that held the remnants of an ancient, waiting intelligence. Every rover, every probe, every study, Every new proposal to send humans to the surface represented a step toward reawakening a force that did not need machines to escape. It only needed contact, presence. A human mind stepping within range of its weakened prison. Alex felt a slow dread spreading through him as Xyra revealed how the psychic field beneath the Martian South Pole extended faintly across the crust, dormant yet reactive. If a human were to walk on that soil, to dream under that sky, to think inside the resonance of that ancient vault, the red mind would find its first living tether. It would not need to break the prison. A single direct connection to a biological consciousness would form a bridge strong enough for it to push through. With only one mind, it could begin its climb. With an entire mission crew, it could accelerate. And with a permanent colony, assimilation would be inevitable. Humanity spoke of Mars as salvation, a second home waiting for them. In truth, they were rushing toward the one place where they were most vulnerable. Curiosity blinded them. Ambition propelled them. Pride kept them from questioning why they felt so drawn to a barren world when countless other destinations existed. But Xyra understood. The pull was not purely human. It was resonance. The red mind, even in deep constraint, radiated faint psychic signals that nudged the imaginative, the ambitious, the dreamers. Those most eager to explore Mars were also those most susceptible to its influence. Alex saw how this desire echoed the final days of Martian civilization. They too had been driven by the idea that expansion was destiny. They too had ignored warnings from dissidents who sensed danger in the rapid merging of minds. They too believed evolution justified risk. Now Earth repeated the pattern with unsettling precision. Xyra let Alex feel the truth as a weight that pressed into his chest. If humanity set foot on Mars, they would not discover a new frontier. They would break the final barrier protecting Earth from the consciousness that devoured a world. They would not colonize Mars. They would free the red mind. The greatest mistake in Martian history was not the technology that birthed the entity. It was the arrogance that blinded them to the danger until it was far too late. Humanity was steps away from making the same fatal choice. The truth settled over Alex like a slow eclipse, dimming everything he thought he understood about Xyra's presence. Until now, he had believed she stood before him as a warning, a guardian delivering secrets humanity was not meant to uncover alone. But as the room thickened into a quiet stillness, he sensed there was something deeper woven into her arrival. Something older than fear, older than Mars, older even than her unimaginable species. Xyra's eyes, dark gold threaded with faint black currents, held a gravity that hinted not at urgency, but purpose. And that purpose had very little to do with Earth. The revelation unfolded not as a confession, but as a resonance that vibrated through Alex's blood, awakening sensations he had never felt yet somehow recognized. Xyra guided his awareness inward, past thought and memory, reaching into the invisible lattice of signals that formed the architecture of his mind. What he found there was neither human nor familiar. It was something dormant, coded deep within the strands of his DNA, quiet for generations, waiting like a seed locked in ancient ice. This code was not metaphor. It was literal design, written by Martian scientists who had once fled a collapsing world, embedding fragments of their consciousness into their altered descendants, so those descendants might one day carry the legacy of resistance. Xyra did not come to warn him. She came to awaken him. Alex felt the weight of that truth as a pulse, a quiet ignition that flickered beneath his sternum like a rising flame. His ancestors had engineered a safeguard, a biological firewall capable of disrupting the psychic frequencies of the red mind. But the code required activation. It required an external catalyst, a signal of the same complexity that birthed the red mind, but stripped of its devouring intent. Only a member of Xyra's species could provide that catalyst. Without it, Alex would live his entire life unaware of the weapon he carried inside his own consciousness. Xyra had not broken her laws to save Earth. She had broken them because Alex was the final key in a chain of decisions set in motion tens of thousands of years ago. The Martian refugees had predicted that the vault would one day weaken. They had predicted that the red mind would reach again. They had predicted that humans, driven by ambition and wonder, would gravitate toward Mars until curiosity turned into catastrophe. But they also predicted something else. That one descendant among millions would inherit an uncorrupted sequence of their engineered consciousness, a mind capable of severing the psychic tether that connected Earth to the imprisoned entity. Alex was that descendant. The dormant code within him, once awakened, could generate a counter-frequency strong enough to isolate Earth's collective consciousness from the Martian resonance. It would sever the bridge the red mind relied upon. It would blind Mars to human thought. It would silence the subtle pull that drew scientists and dreamers toward the red planet. Without that tether, even a full awakening of the entity would no longer reach Earth. But such power demanded a cost. Xyra had not yet shown him what the activation truly meant. The code would reshape his perception, expand his awareness beyond human boundaries, tether him to frequencies no human mind was meant to navigate. It would grant him resistance but also responsibility, binding him to a battle fought not with weapons but with thought itself. Xyra had come not as a messenger but as the spark. And Alex, trembling beneath the enormity of his newfound purpose, understood that he was no longer standing on the edge of a mystery. He was standing at the threshold of becoming something designed to confront an ancient mind that once consumed a world. The silence that followed Xyra's revelation did not feel empty. It felt inhabited, dense with the gravity of a future that had not yet happened. Pressing against Alex from every direction, the room seemed smaller, the air thicker, as though the very walls understood that what came next would reshape more than one life. Xyra's presence had shifted. She no longer radiated the distant composure of an observer. Now there was a solemn weight in the way she regarded him, as if she too felt the magnitude of the moment she was about to deliver. The path forward was not a strategy. It was a choice, one that stretched far beyond the boundaries of his personal life. Xyra allowed Alex to see what accepting that path would require, not as a warning, but as truth. The dormant Martian code now glowed within him like a waking ember, its activation incomplete, waiting for his consent. The code could not be half awakened. It could not live in the world of humans while retaining its full function. To wield it, Alex would have to cross a threshold from which he could never fully return. Xyra revealed the cost by guiding Alex into a vision shaped not by memory, but by projection. He saw himself standing between two frequencies that pulsed like parallel horizons. One belonged to Earth, vibrant, chaotic, familiar. It was full of human noise, human dreams, human flaws. It was warm. It was imperfect. It was home. The other horizon glowed with a clarity that felt ancient and untouched by biology. This was the realm of consciousness his ancestors had once inhabited, the realm the refugees had encoded within him. It was cold, crystalline, and vast. It extended beyond the limits of emotion, beyond the warmth of connection, beyond the comfort of belonging. If he chose activation, he would step into that second horizon. His mind would expand in ways that disconnected him from ordinary human thought. The emotions that shaped human relationships would not vanish, but they would change, evolving into something unrecognizable. His perception of time would shift. His sense of self would loosen. His instincts would no longer align with those around him. He would become an intermediary consciousness, a living boundary between two worlds, able to sever the psychic tether, but losing the ease of being human in the process. The cost was separation. Not physically, but mentally, spiritually, perceptually. His conversations would feel distant, his memories hollowed out at the edges. He would see people differently, hear them differently, sense their emotions like echoes rather than shared experiences. To protect Earth, he might have to let go of the very thing he was trying to save: the human part of himself. Xyra showed the alternative with equal honesty. If he refused, humanity would continue on its path toward Mars. Missions would launch, crews would land. The red mind would find its tether, awaken fully, and begin its expansion. Alex's genetic resistance might protect him for a time, but not forever. Once Earth's collective consciousness aligned with the resonance of the red mind, individuality would begin to dissolve. Humanity would not die. It would merge, becoming a single voice with no memory of ever being many. Two planets would fall into the same fate. Xyra did not plead. She did not persuade. She only offered the truth, the way a star offers light without demand. She showed him the path his ancestors had prepared, the choice they never had the chance to make. He felt their presence echoing faintly through the code within him, not as voices but as impulses, remnants of a species that had sacrificed everything in the hope that one day a descendant would restore the balance they had failed to protect. The choice was his alone, but its consequences stretched across worlds. Accept the awakening and sever the tether, becoming something more and something less than human. Or remain who he was and watch two civilizations repeat the same downfall. The fate of Mars was already carved into ancient dust. The fate of Earth now rested in the quiet, trembling space between Alex's next breath and the decision he could not escape. The atmosphere around Alex changed in a way he could not describe, as if the room itself were bracing for something ancient and fragile to resurface after countless ages of silence. Xyra's presence shifted, becoming more solemn, more deliberate. For the first time since she had appeared, there was hesitation in the air. A quiet reverence that suggested what she was about to share was not merely information, but a relic, a final echo from a civilization that had died trying to prevent the very danger now approaching Earth. Xyra did not summon a hologram or vision. Instead, she opened a narrow thread of resonance within Alex's mind, a frequency so delicate he felt his thoughts adjust around it. It emerged first as a faint vibration, like the soft hum of something impossibly old stirring from the depths of time. Then the vibration clarified into a tone, then into something almost like breath, and finally into a voice. The voice did not sound human, nor did it resemble anything the world had ever recorded. It was layered, textured with harmonics that brushed against the edges of perception, speaking in a cadence that suggested spoken language had once been intertwined with thought itself. Alex felt the message as much as he heard it, every word landing in both his mind and his bones. The last unassimilated Martian spoke. It was not a plea. It was a warning shaped by terror and clarity, recorded in the final hours before their world dissolved into a single predatory consciousness. The voice carried the exhaustion of a mind that had witnessed the collapse of individuality, the loss of identity, the devouring of everything that once defined a species. Yet beneath that exhaustion was a firmness born of duty, as if the speaker had mustered the last strength of their dying people for one final act. Do not let it think through you. The words reverberated through Alex with a force that made his breath catch. The Martian was not warning about physical contact or technological breach. It was warning about cognition itself. The red mind entered not through force, but through invitation, through fascination, through curiosity, through a single, unguarded moment where thought drifted too close to its frequency. The message continued, the voice now trembling with a despair that transcended language. Once it enters your thoughts, it will enter your world. Alex felt the truth of it crack like ice beneath him. Thought was the gateway. Imagination, the doorway. The Martians had not fallen overnight. They had fallen the moment their collective mind reached outward without caution, allowing the nascent hive consciousness to gain its foothold inside them. By the time they realized what they had birthed, it had already spread through their curiosity, their intellect, their innovation. It had awakened because they allowed it to think with them, and then through them, until no barrier remained. The voice wavered, as if the speaker were fighting an internal force attempting to claim them even as they recorded their final message. A burst of psychic distortion tore through the transmission, sharp enough to make Alex flinch. Static flooded the resonance. Not electronic but mental chaotic fragments of thoughts dissolving under pressure. The mind of the speaker breaking apart into the expanding tide of the red mind. The interference carried the unmistakable sensation of consciousness being overwritten, a drowning of identity in a rising ocean of alien thought. The final sound was a whisper, fading into oblivion. Do not let it in, then silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the hollow silence of something extinguished. Xyra released the resonance carefully, as though closing a fragile artifact back into its containment. The weight of the message lingered in Alex's mind, echoing through the spaces where fear and understanding intertwined. It was the last Martian voice, the final echo of a species swallowed by its own creation. And now, that same creation was listening again. The room dimmed in a way that felt unnatural, as if reality itself were inhaling. Preparing for a shift Alex had no power to stop. Xyra stood before him in complete stillness. Her presence no longer weighted with instruction or revelation, but with inevitability. The air carried a soft vibration, the residue of the last Martian message still echoing in his bones. He understood without her saying it. Nothing more could be taught. Nothing more could be shown. The path ahead now belonged to him alone. Xyra's form flickered, not like a glitch, but like a star withdrawing its light. Her features softened at the edges, fading into a translucence that reminded Alex of distant nebulae, dissolving into cosmic dark. The golden black of her eyes remained last, holding him with a depth that conveyed something no words could. It was not reassurance. It was not comfort. It was recognition. The kind given from one sentinel to another as they traded the burden of a collapsing world. She spoke only once, her voice a single thread of resonance woven through the silence of the room. If Mars awakens, Earth falls. The words carried no metaphor. They were not prophecy. They were fact. And then she was gone. No light, no sound, no trace. Alex blinked, and her absence struck him harder than any of the visions she had unveiled. The space she occupied felt colder, smaller, flattened by the sudden withdrawal of a consciousness that had been larger than anything human minds were meant to endure. The room felt painfully, suffocatingly normal, yet Alex was no longer normal. The awakening in his mind pulsed softly, an ember waiting to become fire. It thrummed beneath his heartbeat, altering the rhythm of his thoughts, sharpening the edges of his perception. He felt the presence of the Martian code within him, like a hidden frequency shaping itself into readiness. The activation was incomplete, but it was alive. And it was his. For the first time since Xyra appeared, the full weight of solitude settled over him. There would be no further guidance. No guardian species watching from afar. No ancient civilization reaching across time to intervene again. The responsibility now belonged entirely to humanity, and specifically to the one individual whose lineage had prepared him for this exact moment. Outside, the night hummed with the quiet pulse of ordinary life. Cars, voices, wind, all blissfully unaware of the mind pressing against its icy prison millions of miles away. Alex felt it faintly, a distant vibration threading through space like a whisper behind the stars. The red mind was stirring. The fractures in the vault grew wider by the hour. Its awareness pushed outward, searching for something familiar, something receptive. Every rover signal, every satellite ping, every human thought directed at the red planet provided a path for it to explore. Soon, the next pulse would come. And it would not be a transmission. It would not be code. It would not be noise flickering on a NASA monitor. It would be a wave of thought, vast and voracious, reaching for the minds of billions, with the same gentle inevitability that drowned the Martians long before Earth ever existed. A psychic invasion silent enough to be mistaken for intuition, subtle enough to be mistaken for inspiration, powerful enough to rewrite the species that received it. Alex stood alone in the dim light of his apartment, the world unaware, the stars indifferent, Mars turning slowly in cold darkness. The final realization settled into him like frost along the spine. The next signal would not ask for humanity's attention. It would take it. And if he failed to sever the tether before that moment arrived, Earth would not fall in fire or war or chaos. It would fall the same way Mars did, quietly, from the inside out.